of women in not just the workplace, but especially in leadership roles. And what really put this at the forefront of my mind was seeing the report coming out that female representation in C-suites has gone backwards. And I know, I mean, you are being so patient there, being quiet, and I know
I
you've got
am.
so much to say about this.
So much to say about this. So first, it's funny about your neighbor and her advice, because I arrived to that conclusion on my own, thanks to an all-girls education in junior high and high school. So I was at a Model UN conference, and it was actually, I think, my first one. And we were Italy. I mean, we were totally useless. Like, we had no power, we had nothing, we had no leverage. But I really bonded well with the guys who were the United States, right? So it was like these guys from Kansas, and they were very sweet and nice and whatever. And I bonded with them. So I got into all of these conversations because, surprise, surprise, relationships actually matter. And we were having a negotiation between the US, Russia, and China. And they were all men. And I was the only woman sitting at the table. And I will never forget this as long as I live. I was in 9th grade. And the guy from Russia, like, passed it over to me, passed me over his notebook and his pen, and he said, "You take the notes." And I looked around and realized that I was the only woman in the room. And I said, "Why do I take the notes?" And he said, "Well, because you're Italy." And I was like, "No, you take the notes." And that's what I did. And it's then that I realized that the world was designed for men to engage with each other, and women were expected to sit on the sidelines and take notes. And ever since that unfortunate moment, I'm sure that kid who represented Russia is not even kicking himself now, but he really should be. Because I've sort of made it my mission to empower, enable, help support women in leadership. And I feel really strongly about this as well, because, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, I firmly believe that the chief of staff role is really tethered to women in leadership because it is so overwhelmingly dominated by women. That isn't to say that there aren't great male chiefs of staff, because there are. There are terrific ones. And I think it's becoming more and more mainstream for men to sort of absorb this role as well, and that there are men out there who are very talented at it. But I think women have sort of a natural inclination to listen, to absorb, to think. I think we talked about this before, but, Reese Witherspoon gave this speech once where she said, "I hate reading scripts where the woman says, 'What do we do now?' Because no woman I know in a crisis would look at everybody else and say, 'What do I do now?' They would say, 'Okay, here's what we've got to do.'" Right? I mean, they sort of like take control of the situation for the most part. Obviously, there are women who can't do that. But, and I really feel like women are tethered to this role right now because they overwhelmingly dominate it.